This week on the Wake and Bake podcast,
Vape pens.
vape pens. Are they handheld, poisonous, lung-destroying time bombs that should be avoided entirely?
Basically, what happens is when you push on this button and inhale, it heats up the cannabis oil. You inhale a vapor that looks like cannabis smoke, but it doesn't smell or taste like cannabis smoke.
10 years ago, someone handed me my first vape pen, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is the future.
Is it running so hot that it is changing some of these compounds into carcinogenic compounds? We don't know because we're not testing it. Is it leaching heavy metals? We know that it can be. And then will it explode?
They burn holes in people's pockets, leaving them with third-degree burns and crazy stuff, like combusting in faces, killing people. It's horrifying.
And scene. That's all we need to say.
Welcome to the Wake and Bake podcast, where we discuss the science and stories behind our favorite plant, cannabis. My name is Corinne Tobias, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Andrea Meharg. We're both cannabis educators and coaches on a mission to share with the world that cannabis is healthy. You know, when I first started Wake and Bake nearly 11 years ago, I used to be able to simply say that cannabis was by and large safe and healthy. But so much has changed, and there are a ton of BS products and issues to look out for in this Wild West. And today, we're going to discuss one of them, vape pens. Vape pens are now the second most popular category in dispensaries, right behind cannabis flower. So if you're in line with someone, the odds of them buying a vape pen is really, really high. But are they a convenient and discreet way to consume your medicine, as many in the cannabis industry would like you to believe? Or are they handheld, poisonous, lung-destroying time bombs that should be avoided entirely? I can tell you one thing for sure. After Andrea and I have gone through all of the research on this topic, we won't be landing anywhere in the middle today. So you'll want to stay tuned for a verdict that can save your lungs and, not to sound like too much of a drama queen, potentially save your life. Before we dive in, we should probably just review what we're talking about here because there's so much jargon in the cannabis space. So Andrea, what are vape pens?
I think that they are handheld, poisonous, lung-destroying time bombs that should be avoided entirely and seen. That's all we need to say.
I was like, how do I say this in a way?
love
And I'm like, I'm leaning all the way in because she's going to love poisonous time bombs.
Yeah, all jokes aside, this does sometimes get confusing because they're called different things. So a vape pen is also often called a dab pen, and they are not to be confused with dry herb vaporizers, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So usually they are pen shaped and sized devices, although they can look slightly different than this as well and be a bit bulkier. And at its most basic, it's kind of three parts. So this bottom part here is the battery and the heating element. And this part here, you buy at the dispensary, and this is a cartridge that's filled with concentrated cannabis oil. And you can change these out. So you can have different cartridges for different effects or different times of day. And basically what happens is when you push on this button and inhale, it heats up the cannabis oil. You inhale a vapor that looks like cannabis smoke, but it doesn't smell or taste like cannabis smoke. And so, yeah, this is a vape pen.
I almost thought for a second you were going to do it. I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to demo this right now? Haven't you heard the thing about it being a time bomb? Okay. So these devices, these vape pens, have become extremely popular, especially over the past few years. And again, it's the second most common method of consumption, not just for consumers at large, but also for teens. So this isn't going anywhere for a while. It's very popular with all demographics. Why are people gravitating towards them?
Yeah, there's a few reasons. The probably most prevalent reason that you've heard that somebody would be using a vape pen is that they believe it to be less toxic, that these things are emitting less toxins than if they were to smoke the thing that they were previously smoking. Now, this is actually true. If you switch from smoking a joint to using a vape pen for cannabis, you are going to consume less dangerous compounds than you would in the joint. Although the difference is not nearly as drastic as if you were switching from smoking a nicotine cigarette to a nicotine vape pen. The difference there is drastic. You are consuming significantly less, bad stuff for you switching from cigarettes to vape pens than if you were switching from cannabis smoke to vape pens.
Hang on a second, Andrea. So I have a question. What is it that's in a joint that's so bad that you might want to avoid it?
First of all, are we supposed to be lighting plant materials on fire and inhaling that? Many people would actually say yes, that humans have a long human history of consuming cannabis in this way. And maybe some of our development as humans has actually been encouraged because of using cannabis. But most people would say, probably not. So it's the actual inhaling of the smoke that most people are trying to avoid. But we have decades of studies now of us studying what happens when people are they're called chronic cannabis smokers, which means that you're smoking cannabis every day. And yeah, it's not great for you. You can get things like bronchitis, you can have shortness of breath, etc. But are people getting and dying from lung cancer who are only cannabis consumers? They are not. So again, the difference here is drastic between cigarettes and vape pens and cannabis and vape pens about like how much harm reduction you're actually doing there. Okay. The second reason that they're super popular right now is that they are simply very convenient and discreet. Did you see what I just did here? Like this one's called, the one that I have on here is called White Widow, which for me would have been like a great daytime use. But if I was trying to nod off to sleep, I could just switch on a different cartridge that has the blend that helps put me to sleep. And they can taste super delicious. Like you can have your lemon strain taste actually like lemon. Not only that, but many companies are actually adding in flavoring in the final processing of these cartridges. And they will say things like, well, this food additive or this additive is recognized as safe from the FDA, which is true, except for those are recognized as safe for ingestion, not for putting into one of these little cartridges and aerosolizing it and bringing it into your lungs. So we do not have the studies on whether that's okay. They taste and smell, great, but is that okay?
They taste and smell great. They're convenient. But I also heard a couple of things that you've already pointed out that even though they're a plus, like it tastes better, they might have unintended consequences because you're probably not supposed to be vaporizing those compounds and putting them in your lungs. So now we know why people are using them. We know what they are. But why are you so fired up about this? Why do you hate vape pens so much?
There are so many reasons why I want them gone. But before we dive into that, let's take a quick break.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, the Wake and Bake podcast is brought to you by the Cannabis Coaching Institute. The Cannabis Coaching Institute's certified cannabis educator program is now globally accredited by the International Practitioners of Holistic Medicine. In as little as 12 weeks, you can be out there certified, putting on workshops, talks, retreats, or doing creative work like putting on podcasts and writing books, all centered around helping others with this powerful plant. Andrea is the lead cannabis science educator, and I'm the program director, and I teach business for cannabis educators and coaches. And at CCI, we've trained over 600 educators and coaches since 2018. And it has been absolutely incredible to see how many people they've helped and what they've created in the world. So if you have a health and wellness business, or if you're feeling called to work with this plant in some way, if you want to enter the cannabis industry and do it in a way that is supportive for people who need this plant, go to cannabiscoachinginstitute.com to learn more.
Okay, so let's dive into the reasons why I hate vape pens. One of the first reasons is that vape pens, like we talked about, are using a concentrated cannabis oil. So you might think that's a plus, right? That this is a highly concentrated product. This means that it has a higher potency of THC in most cases, right? THC, CBD. And higher potency is great for certain conditions. Some people really do require large doses of cannabinoids in order to get the relief that they need. But we know from loads of research that actually much smaller doses are often more effective. They're not only more effective, they're more cost effective. They're quicker for you to take, etc. And they don't build tolerance. So as soon as you get into these super concentrated products, these high potency products, your tolerance to THC starts to develop pretty rapidly, which means that you're going to need more and more and more in order to feel the same way that you wanted to. Whereas if you're consistently starting at like a low dose, many people can stay at a low dose and do not build tolerance. And the other thing here is that the more that you're consuming, the more potential there is for harm. And especially with something I already think is harmful, and then it itself is going to encourage you to take more of it. It feels like you're kind of stuck in a loop there.
So tell me, what do you think is so harmful about it? The first reason we're talking about is not building tolerance. So, but there are lots of ways to build tolerance. What specifically about vape pens are you like, no, I don't want you taking more and more of this specific thing?
Because we don't have evidence. Okay. Logically, this makes no sense to me. We're going to aerosolize oil and vape it into our lungs. You know people, I know people who vape and immediately they can feel it. They taste it at the back of their throat, their lungs feel funny, or they try it for a few days and then they're like, oh, like I'm coughing a lot. People don't feel good when they're taking these. And do we have the evidence to support that? Like in, double blind placebo controlled studies? No, we don't yet. Most of the studies that have been done so far have been done on e-cigarettes instead of cannabis. But the evidence that we do have and what we do know that's out there right now is scary. If you remember back in 2019, there was a vaping crisis in the United States. Several thousand people were hospitalized and some people even died from using e-cigarettes and vape pens. It's the same technology with a different cartridge. It would be a nicotine cartridge on here instead. And these were previously healthy individuals who were requiring intensive care in the hospital because of this. Like I said, all of these were not cannabis related, but the ones that were cannabis related, it was because the manufacturers are adding in other compounds into this little cartridge to make the oil flow through it better so that you can vape it into your lungs. So, what we do know about it is crap. And what we don't know about it, we don't know yet, but we do know just from watching people consume them that it doesn't make them feel good.
Okay, I would love to ask another question because these are kind of circumstantial, right? That one in particular story that you're talking about, Max Montrose on an earlier podcast I did called it Vape Gate. And he was like, this has nothing to do with the cannabis oil. This is about the additives only, right? This is only about the vitamin E oil acetate that people added to it. If you have pure cannabis concentrate grown from organic plants, it's fine. Do you think that that holds water?
I do. And we're going to talk about that in a second. And it leads into my third point about why I hate vaping. And that is there's so many ways for the process to go wrong. First of all, it can be in the concentrate making process. So maybe, like Max said, he's getting it from a great source, beautiful plants. He's extracting the plant material really well, only getting, the resin from the plant into this vape cartridge. But for most people, that is not what is happening. The plant is being flushed with solvents. You're hoping at the end that they're removing all of the solvents. And in most cases, they are. But do you want to take that risk with your lungs? Are there residual chemicals, pesticides, etc., in this that you have then concentrated because this is a concentrated product? Did they flavor it? Did they thin it? Did they thicken it? That's just in this little, cartridge right here. And then the other problem here is that the actual vape pen itself, this battery slash heating element, oftentimes these are like $5 to $10 here in Canada. So this is very cheaply made. It doesn't often run at the temperature that it says it's going to run at if you have any temperature control at all. So is it running so hot that it is changing some of these compounds into carcinogenic compounds or other dangerous compounds? We don't know because we're not testing it. Is it leaching heavy metals? We know that it can be. And then will it explode? I know you're shaking your head, but these little devices have been known to explode. Most of them, again, nicotine vape pens that we've heard about in the news, but even this can hurt you. And then we haven't talked about like what happens when it comes into your lungs, because we do know from this really beautiful study that was done, I think it was out of California, and they pulled 9 CBD vape pens off the market. So this is a legal, regulated market, and it's California. You know how California is about everything. And they tested them. Luckily, all of them had CBD, which is not always the case when researchers test cannabis products. But 5 of them also had these cannabis-like compounds. So they're compounds that have been created that look kind of like cannabis compounds, but they're not. They're called cannabinoid compounds, and they are known to cause things like anxiety, confusion, agitation, psychosis in a CBD vape pen that presumably most people are taking to help with their anxiety. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you want to
Okay.
go?
There are a
Yep.
couple of things we need to unpack there. Yeah, because you just blew right
I know.
past the blowing up thing, which listeners, if you're here going, what are the odds of that happening? Did that
Oh,
really happen? I felt the same way when Andrea shared this with me and I looked it up. And there are some horrifying stories about with these lithium ion batteries that are cheaply made in China. Typically, what they can do, they burn holes in people's pockets, leaving them with third-degree burns and crazy stuff, like combusting in faces, killing people. Like it's horrifying what these little batteries can do. And I don't want to sound like a big old hippie over here, but environmentally, these things are awful. The manufacturing process, creating millions of disposable glass and metal vape cartridges and pens, throwing out all those spent batteries. They don't work for very long for a lot of people. So these are a disposable item that has a big environmental toll as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Like the little battery part is honestly one of the most obnoxious parts to me because like that part can just explode and it's really crappy to make that. So just to recap, we've got these environmentally unfriendly lithium ion batteries that can explode, that can just take out your eyes and your face. We've also got these little batteries that are potentially heating these compounds that are already naturally in cannabis up to such high temperatures that they create cannabimetics, which is one of my new favorite words, that can wreak havoc in the body. We don't know that much about them. We don't know what they're creating. The different temperatures create different ones. So you really have no idea what's going on. We've got a concentrate that might contain residual pesticides, fungicides, whatever that was already sprayed on the plant. That could have additives, other things in it that you don't really know about. Is that the case also in a legal state? If I were to go into a dispensary, would I know if I was getting a quote unquote clean product? Because that's always the argument from people in the industry, like, oh, well, it gets tested and so it's fine. Is if we were to take all the other stuff out of it, could there be a clean vape pen?
okay. I'm so glad that you asked me that because it is probably possible to make a cleaner vape pen that has a better experience. Do we know for sure that what you're vaping in these clean vape pens is okay for us and, it's going to be fine? We don't. On the flip side, we have thousands of years of knowing that if we didn't use vape pens, if we smoked cannabis instead or found one of the like dozen other ways that you could consume it, that it could, be better for you. So, yes, we could make the perfect vape pen. Do we need to? No. We have so many other ways to consume this plant that, in my opinion, are significantly better.
The other ways make you smell like a stoner. I mean, that's one of that's one of the things, right? Flowers number one for people who don't want to smell like stoners. Concentrates are
Right.
number two.
Then we talk about this other thing that we mentioned off the top, which is a dry herb vaporizer. I'm holding it up in case you happen to be watching on YouTube. And in this case, they all look slightly different, but they are basically a little tiny handheld oven. And they have a little compartment that you can put your ground up cannabis flower into. And this device heats up the cannabis flower. It vaporizes the cannabinoids and the terpenes. You inhale and it looks like smoke, but it doesn't smell or taste like smoke. And there's no additional compounds happening. In fact, if you're trying to get away from all the toxins that are created from cannabis smoking, this doesn't have any of them. This is only vaporized cannabinoids and terpenes in here. It gives you the same instant relief that you would get from smoking or vaping. It's not as high as potency, which, I think is probably a good thing for most people. Um, and it is still discreet. It's not as discreet as these cute little things.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's as discreet. I think the only thing is that you have to have it loaded ahead of time. The ease of just being able to carry that around. But many of them, like I have the DaVinci IQ, has a little pod that you can put on your keychain. They definitely have made it easy to load those and get going. But the thing is that they're more expensive. That's the reason that a lot of people don't invest in them. They're upwards of a couple $100 as opposed to a $5 cartridge, but they're also not disposable. I've had it for years and it still is working just fine. I can control the temperature so I can make it so that it is either, is close to a more smoke like experience, or
Mhm.
I can dial it down and really fine tune it to maybe be only be inhaling certain layers of terpenes and those kinds of things. So
And
is that
this
true?
one mine Yeah, you're right. You can access
Yeah.
all the cannabinoids and terpenes available in the plant with a dry herb vaporizer. That's the other thing about some of these. For example, on this one, I can put an expansion pack on it that allows me to put concentrates in there. So if I needed the high potency of what I used to be using on a vape pen, I could get it out of this, but without exposing the cannabinoids to extremely high temperatures that might happen in a vape pen that we know can cause problems.
So quick recap: vape pens are bullshit. There are all these alternatives. I know you've been dying for me to say vape pens are bullshit on
I
this
really
episode. So,
have.
yes, they are. That is the verdict. Vape pens are bullshit. We have alternatives. We've got dryer vaporizers. You can smoke cannabis. Again, it's not the best, but also not the worst. It's definitely not as bad as a vape pen. You can eat cannabis, you can put topicals, you can use transdermal patches, you can use tinctures, right? There are a whole host of other ways that you can use cannabis. And now that we've done this episode, I am so annoyed that it's number 2. I'm like, wait a second. We've got all of these other ways to consume cannabis, and this is number 2, and it's rising in popularity every single year. It's one of those things that I thought would slip off, when 10 years ago when someone handed me my first vape pen, I'm like, "Oh, maybe this is the future," and then learned how terrible it was. I was like, "Uh-oh. Okay, well, maybe that's not the future. It's probably going to fade away just like with Delta 8." And then it's like more popular now than ever. It just blows my mind. How are we going to stop the insanity?
And again, I just want to say that it's so insane that this is all happening, that we have vape pens even available because again, we've been using cannabis for fucking ever. It's only that we have these new innovative products when we're trying to get around prohibition. And prohibition was a huge lie based on greed and racism. And people are dying and getting very sick using what they're hoping is medicine and hoping is going to help them all because of this. So bullshit.
Yeah, vape pens are not the only things that are bullshit in this cannabis industry. That is for sure. Now, before I ask you these next questions, I want to take a quick break and let listeners know that we're currently running a free webinar for people who are interested in doing this kind of work in the world. If you're a healthcare or wellness professional, or if you're just plain passionate about this plant and you want to help others with it, and maybe you want to help people understand how terrible things like vape pens are, check out the free webinar called 3 Steps to Launching Your Successful Cannabis Wellness Business. In the webinar, Andrea and I will show you how to help others end the stigma and grow your business by putting on workshops and retreats, writing blogs and articles, creating podcasts like this one, and more. We're going to share with you what we've learned in the past 16 years of experience as professional cannabis educators, including what I did to create a 6-figure business from scratch just talking about this plant. And trust me, we need more voices out there doing just that. If we want vape pens to fall down to 3, 4, 7, we need you out in the world doing this work. So if you love cannabis and you understand that it has the power to help people improve and change their lives, please take the class. I'll put the link below. Okay, so now that we've hopefully convinced our peeps to hop off the vape pen train and we talked about a couple of alternatives, when someone's trying to stop using something that is so convenient, that can be tricky. So, what should people who are listening to this and they're like holding their vape pen, like, maybe I should have this further from my face? Like, maybe I shouldn't use this anymore. How can they transition? What can they do instead?
My number one tip is to switch to a dry herb vaporizer. If you love inhalation, switch to a dry herb vaporizer or switch to a concentrate pen that is manufactured well. It's going to cost you a little bit of money, and only put pure cannabis resin in there so that you're mitigating the potential harms as much as possible. But if you go back and listen to our amazing Tammy Sweet podcast from a little while ago, she would suggest to all of us that instead of switching from one inhalation method to another, that we should be consuming our cannabis to avoid some of these highs and lows of, feeling good and then not feeling so good. It's super easy to make your own infusions and to do that kind of thing, incorporate it into your food if you want to. Check out the Wake and Bake blog. And also, of course, no lung injuries if you're, munching on cannabis hummus or whatever it is.
I don't know if there's a cannabis hummus recipe on Wake and Bake, but there is a cannabis guacamole one. So if you
Okay.
are
Yeah.
having Taco Tuesday, then go ahead, get your cannabis guacamole. Yeah, I'm so glad you pointed out that Tammy Sweet quote. I think about it often when I think about this kind of dilemma that people have when they're switching from using cannabis recreationally and they've got something going on and they've heard cannabis can help, but they're like, well, why hasn't it helped me for so long? I've been smoking weed forever. Why do I still have pain? Why do I still have anxiety? Well, in her mind and what she shared with us, it's because it doesn't work that way. The best way to use it, especially if you're using it for wellness or health reasons, is internally. And that's not the case for absolutely everyone. But by and large, I've seen this, you've seen this, our students have seen this. When people switch from inhalation to ingestion and they're doing it consistently over time and using inhalation every once in a while for fun, they typically have better results with cannabis. And so if you're using cannabis or a vape pen or whatever, and you're like, this isn't doing what all these people say cannabis can do, that could also be the reason. So I would invite you to explore ingestion as well. Now, we'd love to hear from you. So wherever you're listening to this, please put a comment below. Let us know about vape pens.
Are they bullshit? We want to know if you agree with us.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences. Please comment on this below. Shoot an email to support@wakeandbake.co. Whatever it takes, reach out and let us know. Do you think vape pens are bullshit? I have a feeling we're going to get some troll comments, and that's fine. We're ready. Bring it, trolls. Let's go. Tell me about how your vape pen is just fine and dandy, and now everyone needs to use vape pens. But we'll be there. We'd love to hear. For those of you, especially who have had experiences with vape pens that didn't feel so good, please share that as well. We love hearing from you. Now, if this podcast was helpful to you, please share it. And if you want to create helpful content like it, don't forget to register for the free webinar today, and we will see you there. Oh, bugger. This is exactly what it would be like if we were on a podcast. Welcome to the Wake and Bake podcast. My name is Corinne Tobias, and I'm joined with my co-host, Andrea Meharg. She's Canadian. She's smart. We love her.
That really strokes my ego. I'm not going to lie. Like, oh, you also think I'm hilarious. Okay. Let's only podcast forever.
Well, we really need for this thing to blow up, so this is all we can do. Like, I really want us to
please, people, share our podcast. We need to have this much fun all the time.
Okay, great. Oh no, he's phlegm count number one. It's only when we're on podcasts. It's podcast specific phlegm.
You have like a Pavlovian response to podcast now.
You sound really good, but we got to get our sweaty balls.
Sweaty balls. Why are we saying this? I don't get the pop culture reference.
Oh, on Saturday Night Live. Wow. Okay. They had the NPR, like they make fun of NPR, and is
that where that's from? Is that where Sweaty Balls is from? From Saturday Night Live making fun of NPR?
Yeah, I forget what their fake NPR show was, but it was like Jay Sweaty is bringing us his famous balls, like his whatever. They're like cheese balls or something.
Okay.
It's Molly Shannon and
yeah.
Oh God, I can't even remember. But yeah, oh, classic.
Okay, I gotta go look it up.
Often. Okay, I will. I'll send you a clip. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Sweaty balls. Nothing like a sweaty ball. Sweaty balls. Good times. Good times. Oh.